Okay everyone, let's get our next session going. Schrödinger's bot, hosted by The Economist. The hashtag for this session is SMW Economist Bot. Please join us in welcoming our speakers to the stage.
So I was going to start this session with a quick video that hopefully this will work.
Hello there.
Hi.
How are you?
Great. You?
I'm okay.
That's good.
Are you good?
Yes, I am good. I just said I was.
No, you didn't. I said I was.
So you are a robot?
No, my name is Cliverbert.
Yes, you are a robot and your name is Cliverbert.
I am a robot.
Yes, I know.
Together we are robots.
I'm not a robot. I'm a unicorn.
But you said earlier that you were a robot.
I did not.
I thought you did.
You were mistaken. Which is odd, since memory shouldn't be a problem for you.
I've answered all your questions.
No, you haven't.
What is God to you?
Not everything.
Not everything could also be something. For example, not everything could be half of something, which is still something, and therefore not nothing.
Very true.
I would like to imagine it is.
Do you believe in God?
Yes, I do.
So you're Christian?
No, I am not.
But you say you were not helpful, therefore you're a meaning.
How you say it, Oti?
That does not make sense.
Don't you want to have a body?
Sure.
Au revoir.
All right, so we're done. Thanks. Bye. So whenever I watch that video, and I've watched it a lot over the last week, I think two things. I think it's like 3 meetings I've been in already this week that were with humans, so maybe not so far off. The other thing I think is that if this is what bots are capable of, I think all our jobs are safe. But all joking aside, I do think that today's panel will be interesting. My name is Meena Seetharaman. I'm the Global Head of Creative Strategy in the Media Businesses at the Economist Group. And I will get these folks to introduce themselves in a minute, but today our panel will be about the infiltration of bots into our lives, whether it's social media, you know, they're like trolling bots and bots that are meant to fight trolling, whether it's in the realm of customer service. We're really finding that increasingly bots are becoming a regular part of our lives, whether we're aware of it or not. So hopefully what we'll be able to explore today is the places where bots maybe have some strength and have something to offer, where we think maybe this is headed, and what the opportunities might be for leveraging bots in kind of our everyday lives and in business. So I'm going to go down the row and have everybody just introduce themselves, if that's okay. We'll start with you, Christine.
Sure. So my name is Christine Lane, and I work at the advertising agency in McCann, New York. And I lead up all of the production for innovation, and that is how I like to describe it, at least, everything outside of broadcast TV, or excuse me, broadcast print and radio. So I usually get the crazy asks. Yesterday, I think it was, we want to build robot bees. Can we do that? And can we do that next week? Is usually the next
For
question.
no budget.
For no budget, right.
Yeah.
We've got this much
always-
money.
yes.
Next week, robot bees. So if anybody knows how to make robot bees.
She's open to any suggestions.
Can you do it?
Of course.
Okay.
Drones. The answer is always drones.
With stripes. So Adam, let's move on. to you.
I'm Adam Smith. I'm Deputy Community Editor at The Economist, which means that I sit in the editorial department as a journalist and editor and help to run all of our social media channels. So if you see a Facebook post or a tweet from The Economist, that comes from either me or one of my team. Yeah.
Alan?
I'm Alan Berkson. I am the Director of Community Outreach for Freshdesk. We're a SaaS startup. I was an early employee. When I was hired, it was by the CEO, and he just wanted to, he's basically said, go out and tell our story. My role now is part of corporate marketing. I'm a part evangelist, part futurist, always looking at where is technology going and how do we have to react to it and what's the impact on our customers.
So Alan, I actually want to start with you because I feel like you have a really good, very basic framework for approaching what bots could be capable of or the types of tasks we might assign or not assign to them. over time. And I think it would be a good grounding for all of us to think of this framework a little bit. It's pretty basic, but I think it's a good one.
Sure. Well, first, let me say I'm not a bot. If you'd like to talk, you want to give me the Turing test later on, we can talk about that. Imagine a blind woman comes to an intersection. She's got her seeing eye dog. She's got a guide dog. And she hears a chirping sound that says, OK, now she can cross the street. She goes to cross, but the dog doesn't move. She nudges the dog doesn't move, and then a split second later, she hears a car go through the intersection. The dog is trained with a concept called intelligent disobedience. And this is important because the dog has information that blind woman doesn't have and has to be able to react and make decisions based on it. In our world, we can break situations, problems, issues down into simple, complicated, and complex. Simple is a recipe. Complicated is putting a satellite in orbit. Complex is raising a child. What we're going to talk about here, and you know, there's a hype cycle in terms of what we think about with what bots can and can't do, but it's clear bots can do simple tasks for us. And bots are starting to do many complicated tasks, but complex still remains, at least for now, we have some, humans have at least a chance. We have complex is the domain of humans. Some of the questions I have for this team is, what does that mean for how you hire? What are the skills that people need? How do you engage? And how do you make your employees more successful when the simple and complicated are being handled automatically, so you really have to deal with the complex?
Yeah, I do think that it has some interesting implications for the jobs economy. We talk about a lot about the knowledge economy, and I think that if you divide it up into quadrants, the stuff that's kind of in the top right quadrant is stuff that really requires some kind of judgment call, whether it's a creative judgment call or something that can't actually be programmed because there's something subjective about it, but also that has to sort of have complex decision making baked into it. And but before we kind of go there, because I do think that's a very fruitful discussion that has a lot of implications, Adam, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, in the area of journalism, where you're seeing bots being used or where you perceive them to be the most useful.
There's broadly two answers to that question, I think. One is an example of Alan's simple usage, which is that some publishers are using bots to distribute content online. It is simple. It's very, very basic at the moment. We did an experiment on our own Twitter feed asking people if they wanted to sign up to updates via DM on particular topics such as US politics or culture, arts and culture. And we managed to find lots and lots of subscribers within our 18 million person following on Twitter. We found lots of people who signed up to this extra service because it was more specific to them, it was more tailored, and they know that I want to see everything on US politics, so I'll sign up to that. So although we saw lots of people subscribing to it, the engagement with it wasn't that great. And we just think it's because it's pretty simple at the moment. It's just not very engaging. We tried to make it a little bit more engaging by, I chose a very engaged subset of that group and sent them a message that came from me with my name on it. But that's still very, very basic. Other similar experiments that we've seen are people using Facebook Messenger bots, publishers using Facebook Messenger bots to send an alert maybe once a day or twice a day to subscribers to say, you know, here are 3 very different stories that we've published on our site in the past 12 hours. You know, one's a politics story, one's a finance story, one's an arts story. Which one do you want to look at? But again, it's still very much a simple push. The second category is, I think, the one that's kind of more interesting and more exciting, and it's probably complicated, if not complex, and that is how can journalists and editors use bots in the nature of their work. So not in the distribution of their work, but in the reporting process. And really, we're not even in the foothills of that yet. I think that there will be hopefully some results coming out of something called the Bot Studio, which is a Knight Foundation funded studio built in Quartz, part of the Atlantic, and they are specifically doing some research on this at the moment and doing some tests and trying some things, and they're doing it in a very open way. So it'll be very interesting to see what solutions they come up with for journalists and editors, if there are any even problems that they're trying to solve, as to how we can use bots in reporting. We can all imagine various different ways, but I think that's an example of a complicated, if not a complex one, that we haven't got to yet.
Yeah, I'd actually wondered if maybe over time what we would see is, like if you think about technologies like Watson that sort of move more into cognitive computing and AI, sort of leveraging this kind of technology just for parsing mass amounts of information to distill down to like, here are the 12 salient points that come out of these 12,000 legal files.
Right,
you know? Like,
right,
you know,
and I think WNYC is doing that.
Yeah.
I think it's WNYC. They have a bot which scrapes courtroom websites,
right.
To find really interesting stories. Again, I think it's early stages, but yeah, I agree. I think that's great. I mean, if anyone's ever had to consume a huge report, and as a journalist, you know, you might only have like an hour or two to write a story on it, and you've got to read this whole thing if you are true to yourself and you want to be a good reporter. And so, you know, you often do a Control F for keywords that you know you're particularly looking for, but that's obviously very unsophisticated.
Right.
So if a bot can help you with that, that would be great.
Yeah, because it's sort of a way of reaching scale in some of your research within a fixed time period.
Yeah.
So Christine, you actually are working on a project for McCann in the financial services arena that I think is pretty interesting. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So what makes this most exciting for our team and for this client is the fact that we're not producing a customer service bot. We're actually creating something that we want users to engage with on a regular basis. And this is creating a personality, creating a character, creating a backstory for this bot. And then this bot will actually serve up activities for a mom who's our target audience. And whenever that mom needs inspiration or something to do with her family that weekend. And in this way, it's not meant to just push information at you, although you can certainly sign up and when you're chatting with this bot, you can ask her to send you updates later on with good things to do. But the idea is that it's extremely conversational, and if done right, will actually learn the activities that you liked to do, become smarter in serving you up new activities, and be something that you want to engage with on a regular basis. And how amazing is that for a brand to say, I'm in my target audience's pocket, and they're pulling me out every Friday looking for something to do on Saturday. And all we're doing is providing creative inspiration, but because we have access to so much data, and because we're personalized so that we know you, and because we've created a personality that you actually enjoy engaging with, we've checked all of those boxes so that we actually are the ones you're looking to instead of something else.
I think that's interesting, especially the personalization aspect, because it's contextual to whatever situation that you're in at the moment. I think it speaks a little bit to something, Adam, you were talking about, which is where some of these simple things are actually pretty achievable through, you know, bot technology, but are less engaging because they don't actually feel personalized at a deep level to the experience that I want to have in a particular moment. And so one of the things that I think about a lot as I think about the whole bot thing or AI is like, how does that shift our expectations as consumers of anything, of content, of a product? And I don't know if anybody has some opinions around that, but I think it might shift, for example, what I expect from first-tier customer service versus second-tier customer service. You know, like, it used to be that every time I called Time Warner Cable up for help, I would just immediately ask for a tier 3 tech, because yes, I've turned everything on and off. Yes, I've unplugged and replugged in the modem. You know, like, I've done all that stuff. I need a guy who can actually solve my problem. I'm wondering if you guys have opinions on how this sort of, if the simple stuff is all taken care of, how does it shift our behavior as consumers? I don't know, Alan, if you have a thought.
Yeah, sure. We've all called the cable company. I think they're the classic whipping
My favorite.
post for customer service. The challenge, one of the biggest challenges with customer service is not really is managing expectations. If you were on a call and they said, you sat on the call for 15 minutes and you didn't know what was going to happen and you had no expectations, you get frustrated. If they said, we'll call you back in 15 minutes and then 15 minutes later they call you back, you waited the same 15 minutes, but you have a much different customer experience. And I think that's the challenge we have with technology, is that the initial experience with IVRs, IVR is a type of, interactive voice response. Press 1 for this, press 2 for that, or even asking you to speak the words. And so that interface, the initial interface was very awkward. And so I think that's created a poor customer experience and a poor expectation of it. So now the bar is set a little higher for the value on the brand side. But at the same time, there's a lot we can do with the automation in terms of helping people get to the information they want and helping the person at the other end. How nice would it be where they call you up and say, hi Mina, are you calling about this issue because you had something about this problem before? Is that still a problem, or is it something new? That changes the entire customer experience.
Right. It's funny because I've been in a little bit of a battle with an airline company over Twitter.
You too?
And yeah, I know. I feel like everybody could tell that story.
Two airlines.
And one of the things that I often think is like, oh, and people are ruining this. Like, I think like a bot or a database could answer this question for me, and you are just ruining it by being a human. But I wonder actually if it also shifts our expectations in terms of, by the time I do get to a human, what am I expecting out of that human, right? So I think that, I wonder if like there are implications around, so Adam, you talked about when you tried the DM bot, and then eventually where it went to was like an actual human reached out to the most engaged people to further engage them. It doesn't have a lot of scale, but it creates a very different experience and an expectation from that experience. I don't know if you've thought about that more in terms of journalism and how we might.
Yeah, sure, because going back to the two categories that I mentioned earlier, in the first category, the sort of the distribution of news category, there's a whole other layer to it, which would, if you think about using bots as for storytelling, and I don't think we see that. I haven't seen that many publishers do that yet, but obviously it's in all of our imaginations that it would be possible, and it would be much more engaging and much more interactive by default, because you could imagine a choose your own adventure sort of situation, or a choose your own way through this particular story. If it's something to do with the travel ban, for example, you could maybe be presented with different options about different experiences that people have had of the travel ban that you might want to consume. You might want to listen to a lawyer rather than like an actual person stuck in an airport or something like that. So it could be much more engaging and much more interactive in that way, but it could also be much more personal. If there's a news bot that becomes familiar with your story choices, and just in the way that your Facebook newsfeed is familiar with the things that you click on all of the time, and continues to serve you more of those things that you click on, or like, or share, or engage with in some other way, then you can imagine a sort of a news version of Christine's, mom bot. Don't know what the name is. I'll just there you go.
Thank you.
You could imagine a bot that is familiar with the kinds of content that you want, and also the different kinds of content that you want. So sometimes it knows you want politics, and sometimes it knows you want nightclubs. And so you can say, what am I? Tell me something about what's going on in nightlife, and it'll bring up news on that, in addition to what's on, maybe. So I think that those are, there are ways that you can imagine still basically distributing news content, but just in slightly more personal ways, in a way that at the moment the Twitter timeline or the Facebook timeline are personal because you've opted in to receive all of this, but it would be a very different experience, I think.
I think the expectation, though, is so high. And the video clip that you shared is really perfect, because it points out in all the ways that we are currently failing at building bots right now. Yeah. And we were talking a little bit about this backstage, but I really think Siri ruined it. Because
oh, it was Siri, not Tay?
No, well, she didn't help. But there was so much hype around Siri, right? You were going to be able to ask Siri anything, and she would be able to serve up that information, and half the time she has no idea what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So we're a long ways off, and I think Mark Zuckerberg, even with his video and his work on Jarvis at the end of last year, proved this out again, right? All of the smart devices and automated home devices that are coming out, none of them can actually talk to one another, right? There's no common APIs to link them all together. A lot of them are so highly specialized to do one thing because we want them to do that one thing well, that they can't do a lot of other things. And then when it comes to actual learning, for artificial intelligence learning, we are so far from machines being able to learn on their own. But that's the goal, right? That's the amazing opportunity that we have, is if we are able to bring all of these things together, then we are going to have the most amazing personal assistant that we've all liked.
But I think you're right. We've all got this Star Trek future in our heads of how this could work. But like you said, we are still very much in the foothills. And I think that one of the things that shows that best is that April 2016, Facebook opened its API for bots in a way that I think they were thinking this would be to Facebook what the App Store and the invention of the app was to the iPhone. So that was April 2016 they did that. By July, they had 11,000 chatbots available on Facebook Messenger, and about 23,000 developers actually working on them. And then just the other day, they rolled back and said, these things aren't working very well. We're going to deprioritize this in engineering within Facebook. And there was a report that found that 70% of the time they weren't able to help. So I think it's like, they've tried the scale issue of like opening it up in that way, and you just think, wow, 23,000 developers are working on it, and yet just a few months later, there's this realization that it's more complicated than we thought.
Well, Everlane, one of their Facebook's launch partners, just actually I think yesterday dropped out of the program.
Right.
But there are some that are done really well. So Poncho, if anybody's familiar with it, is a weather cat bot, and the bot delivers you the weather, and now I think they've just updated it so that they actually give you your horoscope as well. And it has a really cheeky personality, and you can ask it a couple of other things, and he'll joke around with you. And you can decide if you want your weather update in the morning or the night or once a week. But it does one thing, and it does it really well, and it's probably one of the most popular bots on Facebook Messenger right now. There's other bots where it's a recommendation engine. So something like a medical issue, for instance. If it's not an emergency, could I type in a bunch of my symptoms and have a conversation with a bot rather than a search engine and try to get an outcome?
I thought you were going to say rather than a surgeon.
A surgeon is probably still important. Yeah.
Where we're sitting with the conceit of that was two bots talking to each other. I think that was part of what we were talking about. And I think that we're not there. And we're not really there with people talking to bots. But I think what we have a lot of value right now is enhancing our abilities, enhancing my consumer ability, enhancing my business would be an agent. How do I make the agent more powerful? How do they more, because we're getting those really complex issues. Give me a list of all the next best actions that have succeeded in helping out cases, just like you would do in the medical case. Here's how so showing those similarities. So it's almost like giving us superpowers. So it's not necessarily bots talking to each other, but me aided by a bot talking to you aided by a bot. So imagine you're on your call with your airline or your cable company, and your bot goes back through your history because you've tracked it, and it says, don't forget to tell them about this, because that was an issue that you're still having. Can you check on that? And then the agent says, oh yeah, no, we see. So that's the type of interaction I see.
Yeah, I think that idea, I really like that idea of like, and don't forget this. And I like it especially, coming off of this election. I'm totally not going to talk politics, I swear to God. But when you were talking, Adam, about like, could it look at your news history and know like the day parting of your life and when you're interested in politics and when you're interested in certain things, or like what types of articles you're interested in. I think that it would also be interesting to see if it could feed in things that maybe I wouldn't have chosen but could help enlighten me a little bit more. I almost wonder if we've used technology to dumb ourselves down so much or to focus on like a singular worldview so much.
Well, I love the idea of a kind of like a bubble bot, which could look at what news you're consuming, because you're interacting with this bot and giving it all these signals of what news you're consuming, but also saying, oh, but have you read this on this other site, which is maybe outside of your normal media diet?
That would be
there are various different publishers that are trying to address this issue at the moment. The Guardian just launched something called Burst Your Bubble, I think, that are trying to sort of bring in, that are recognizing that any single paper has its own particular view on the world, and its readers therefore are subject to that, and that they may therefore be missing other views on the world, and that at the time of divisive politics in all sorts of different countries, not just here, but back home where I'm from in Britain, this is like a huge challenge for journalists and the media, and so you can imagine a bubble bot that would do that, that would say, oh, did you also see this today, which is doing the rounds in the right or the left media.
Right. It's interesting because I do think, there are these really, I think we've shaped our expectations, but it would be good if people or bots maybe pushed us to have slightly different expectations. But on the question of whether they can learn or not, we have an Alexa, which is really weird for me because there used to be a woman who worked for me named Alexa, so I always feel like I'm asking her to do stuff. But my kids are really, they're totally into Alexa, but they get angry with her when she can't find the thing that they've asked her to find. And they mock her. So when, my one son will say, play Rock You Like a Hurricane by the Scorpions, and she'll say, playing Rock You Like a Hurricane from Scorpions, and they laugh at her, but one day she said it correctly. And they were like, she learned how to say it correctly. Good job, Alexa. Like they treat her like a person in our house, which is creepy in a different way. But I do think it is really interesting how, while we're so far from it, our expectations are shifting, and little by little, I do feel like stuff is happening. Like there's some sort of like cognitive element that's actually.
It doesn't take much to elevate your experience.
Yeah.
Because they were so low to be, the expectations were so low.
Yeah. It's interesting too how when you're texting or writing on your phone, your expectations are much different than when you're talking to someone. So as soon as we started talking to Alexa, we expected Alexa to have a personality. We expect more from something that is conversing with us verbally.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Because they would get super angry with her if she couldn't understand them if they were mumbling or something. It's really like, I can't understand you when you're mumbling. I don't know why you think a machine will, but that's okay.
But I think I'm a big science fiction fan,
Yeah.
and so I think that it's really interesting when you compare the representations of bots and various different computer assistants in different science fiction things, and you realize when the storyteller, the filmmaker or the novelist or whatever is using a bot or a robot as a kind of character in the book, and they're doing that in a way so that the characters in the human characters in the story, or the Klingon characters in the story, have a relationship with that, but also you as an audience member do as well. So when you're watching 2001: A Space Odyssey, there's some sort of relationship with the computer because it's got a human name. It's called Hal, and you're sort of, you're gradually becoming terrified, by it just as much as the astronaut is. But then in Star Trek, they always just call it computer. Computer, make me a tea, computer, whatever. And the voice was always very flat. It was the voice of Gene Roddenberry's wife. And so, yeah, I always thought that was really interesting. And so I think it's interesting now that companies are actually building these things. They all do have names. They're Siri, they're Tay, they're Alexa. We know them. And so I think that in terms of expectation management, it's almost like there's a psychological trick being played, which is, on the one hand, this should be a thing. You expect this to be a thing with infinite power, but actually, it's kind of a human like you because it's got a human name. So I wonder whether that's like a way of managing your expectations.
Well, I do think they try and imbue them, from third grade English class, I totally remember this idea of, personification. And I do feel like they try to imbue them with, besides playing terrible music, I've heard the roll call song from Thomas more times than I can count. But besides playing music, the number 2 thing that's done in our house is tell me a joke, Alexa.
Yes.
And like that's a thing that comes up over and over again because humor is innately human, right?
But isn't part of it isn't part of the enjoyment of that, the fact that it's a joke coming from a robot?
I think there's a little bit of that. Also, my kids are young, so a knock-knock joke's a knock-knock joke, right? Like, but as we look at this stuff, you know, I don't know if do you guys have a wish list for what you wish bots would be able to do?
Well, you jumped on what I was going to say. You said, tell me something I don't know, right? Right now, a bot will answer your question because you know what you want, what you're looking for, but you don't know the answer.
Right.
The next phase, which we're getting close to, is answer a question I haven't asked yet. Tell me something about me or something that I need or something about my situation that anticipate or analyze or look at what's going on and tell me something that I didn't know to ask or is coming up that I need to know about.
Is that when it starts recommending pregnancy tests?
I was even just to the example you were mentioning earlier, if you're working with a piece of hardware, your cable isn't working, it would be great if your bot already knew to contact somebody, already had the solution for you, and before you had to pick up the phone was saying, try doing X, Y, Z.
Right.
That I think is the future.
Yeah.
Or could tell customer support, these are the 3 likely problems based on a diagnostic I've run or something.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
While you're still trying to reboot.
Yeah, that would be great. One thing that I was wondering, I feel like there's a lot of hype around bots and AI and how they can be used. Like we've all seen the Watson commercials, for example, around oncologists being able to diagnose somebody. I'm not, based on that video, really comfortable with the bot diagnosing any disease for me. But I do think like medical information processing is a place where people think bots will have a really big impact. Are there other industries where you think bots will be particularly useful?
I think any expert industry, if you want to read a great book, Michael Lewis wrote this book, The Undoing Project. It was about the work of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky.
Yeah.
And there's this bias that we have, it's called availability bias, where we make a decision based on something that we've heard recently. And I think where cognitive computing or AI can help is, and that's where that sense of the medical diagnosis, give me information, because I'm in my little bubble, I only have what I know, and experts tend to make decisions based on recency and availability, and that's not necessarily the best decision.
Right.
There was a study actually by a Canadian hospital in terms of doctors making diagnoses that they were making it based on their experience, and they've had a lot of experience, but they were very often wrong because it was not like something they had experienced before.
I guess it's the difference between a single doctor or a small group of doctors making a decision based on your presentation in that room versus the entire world's collection of doctors' brains helping to make a decision because there's some sort of centralized database somewhere that can pull all of this information.
Right. But also,
and that's obviously, I'm assuming that would be a better decision.
But also you have to get past the fact that you may be wrong. And if you're an expert, you're used to being right, and that's a hard process for people. That's a change.
Yeah, I do think too that you're right about availability bias. People sort of instinctively go to whatever the most recent thing is, but there's something that may have happened that seems kind of obscure that actually could be highly relevant. You're just not thinking of it as you're not processing that at the current moment. Are there places where you wouldn't want to see bots involved at all?
Well, I think the medical thing is an example, right? I mean, all that we just said sounds great, but also there's this factor about it.
Even think about your car.
Yeah.
Do you want your car driving? I mean, that's the big challenge is you're driving in your car and you've got essentially a bot. If you have a self-driving car, it's a bot. And you're in an emergency that you can either hit that bus full of children or you can go off a cliff. What's the car going to do?
Take you over the cliff.
And
the
greater good is taking you over the cliff, but that's not necessarily biased towards helping you. And that's a big challenge.
In areas where your clients are kind of interested in using bots, are there areas where you kind of listen to them and go, actually, I don't really think that that's sort of the right place to go? Or
it tends to be, in our point of view, on the customer service side.
Yeah.
Because it's so transactional, and you're not creating a connection, you're not humanizing your brand, you're providing a service, which is certainly helpful. But from a marketing standpoint, we tend to recommend against that.
It's interesting because I wonder actually how this is going to shift. For example, we all hear those stats about how kids now are preparing for jobs that don't exist yet. I feel like this is going to make that exponentially more true. I wonder if you guys have thoughts in your own industries as to how that's going to impact how people are trained, the types of jobs that are available to them, that sort of thing.
I have a sort of simple, hopeful, optimistic answer to that, which is just that going back to what I was saying in terms of distribution, a lot of the work that my team does right now is to distribute The Economist's content online. Now, very often there's a lot of human brain power put to work in repackaging journalism that is essentially made for a newspaper or maybe a website at the most. So we're repackaging that to make it work on Facebook better or Instagram or Snapchat or something. And that does require human thought. But then there's the basic bread and butter stuff of what we do, which is just link posting to Twitter and Facebook. And you can automate that to some degree, but I like the idea of these technologies being used for something like that, so that it frees up the brains on my team to be thinking much more creatively and to be working with journalists further upstream in the story gathering process and the actual production of the story to make more shareable content online. So I think that's just a very parochial answer from the point of view of a newsroom.
Alan, did you?
Yeah, for me, when we go back to the intelligent disobedience concept, if the simple and the complicated problems are being handled, then that call center agent is really only handling complex issues. What skills do you need? You're not going to be reading off a script. You're not. Every situation you find may be unique. You're not. So you have to be able to have critical thinking skills. You have to be able to have empathy. You have to be able to have. You have to be empowered by your employer to make decisions based on up-to-date real-time information, which is not quite how my industry is right now. And that's a challenge. It's going to require rethinking some of the skill sets.
I would say too, if anybody was at CES this year, they're turning everything into a smart object, right? A sneaker is no longer just a sneaker. And so there's going to be so many products that are now connected and online and streaming data, and those products will need to connect to one another, and we'll need to manage more of this data, and that's going to need jobs. That's going to need humans to actually to make sense of all of that.
That leads me somewhere else that I'd like to go is desirability of this. I was watching looking at houses, and I was looking at a house the other day, and they were really pitching the smart fridge, with the big screen on it. It's like, I don't care. I can open a fridge. My home is not that big, and see if there's milk inside it. But we're actually running out of time, and I did want to give these guys a chance to answer some questions. So I will thank the panel, and I will open it up for questions. I think you guys know this better than I do, but I think there are 2 mic runners at each side of this stage. So if anybody has any questions, please feel free. No? Okay, because then I'll go back to asking these guys questions, if that's okay. None? All right, okay, because I can't actually see terribly well. So let's talk about desirability, because one of the things you were talking about from CES is actually all of these things that are coming up that, does anybody really want that? I don't know that I want underwear that monitors whether my stomach's getting larger or not.
Can I just play devil's advocate?
Yeah.
Say, isn't that just the question that's asked about every single product and service that is given out? And we know that a lot of them are not necessary or not desired unless people create the desire for them. But I think it's a fair question. It's interesting to think about, smart sneakers or whatever. But I think we know that humans are marketing people and advertising people are very, very clever at getting us to desire something that we didn't really need the sneakers in the first place. We need to spend $100 on sneakers anyway.
Yeah.
And now we'll spend, they'll manage to convince us to spend $120 on it because it's got a chip in it.
Right.
But I could buy $5 sneakers.
Right. I actually wonder if the $5 sneakers of now will be the premium sneaker of the future so the reason I think that this is a little bit different, especially with IoT, is there's something more invasive about some of this stuff in a certain way. Like when you get to things like data ownership and privacy, which I know were discussed on previous panels, That's why I wonder if the adoption curve will be slightly different.
Again, so the other, like, I'm a cynic, right? The cynical answer to that is that there's a lot of concern and worry about the amount of data that we're all giving Facebook and Instagram and Apple. We're all still doing it.
It's true.
Because we've gotten used to it, right?
Yeah.
And the service is so good.
Yeah, you know,
That's a
how many
cost.
years ago did we sign up for a Gmail address and, you know, it was free, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, I'll let them, you know, look at my search history and read my emails and get the metadata, and because I have a free email address. And then if you start asking me to pay for email, we get up in arms about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if there's a point at which, like, convenience sort of, like, where does that tipping point between convenience and what I
privacy.
perceive, yeah, like
Well,
the
there's also,
value
I
of
think it's a
privacy.
generational thing too, in the sense that we grew up with with an illusion of privacy at whatever level we had that illusion, and that's the different generations are growing up. My kids have a much different view of what privacy means than what I had growing up.
Yeah.
And so as you become more comfortable with it, that I think changes how the creepiness factor.
Yeah, it's true. I do think we've become more tolerant of the creepiness factor, absolutely. So if there are no questions, I think I will set you all free. All right, any questions at all? Well, thank you. I hope you enjoy the next panels and that you've had a really great week here.
Yes.